I grew up in Hicksville, which is, I don't know, about 15 miles south of here. My mom used to take us up to the North Shore. You know, I grew up on Long Island, but if you grew up in Hicksville, you didn't know you were on an island. You could be in the Midwest somewhere, or in New Jersey. It was a housing development. And we'd come up here and saw the magic of these coves and these inlets and the bays, and it was spectacular. We could go to Jones Beach too, but that was different. This part of the island is unique. It's Gadsby. You go one harbor over, the water's not the same. The environment's not the same. This is a very special environment, very special ecosystem here. There's not many like it.
I have a degree in accounting finance from a major United States university. And I sat there and I interviewed for my first career job, which was forensic accounting for the FBI. And I kept looking out the window. And as the guys sizing me up, I kept on thinking, I don't know what I want to do, but I want to be out there as I'm looking out the window. I want to be outside. And much to my parents' disappointment, I was the first one ever to graduate college. I became a Baymen. And I was actually cut off from the family for several years. We've since made our peace and we have a loving relationship. But I was cut off with their disappointment of me choosing life on the water.
I'm not gonna lie, at first I really hated it, but I got into it. And then I said, how hard could this be? So I went and started out on my own and learned just how hard it can be.
You stick the rake down in the bottom and you feel clams, and you feel that life that's down there, and you pull it up, and you're a living thing when you're harvesting a living thing, and it's sad to see that that living thing may not be here tonight.
Hydraulic dredge boats are just coming and swiping the bottom all day long, and this plume is everywhere.
From my perspective, what I saw starting off almost 11, 12 years ago, guys are struggling. What guys would do in an hour, they're doing it all day. That's how it is now.
They should call it destruction, is what they should call it, because it just destroys everything it comes in contact with. There's no dredge that's made, you know, that you could throw it in the water and drag it around and it's just gonna pick up what you want. It drags everything up. Crabs, horseshoe crabs, fish, eggs, anything. Anything that lives in the harbor is being killed just so they could get a clam, and in the process they're killing all the natural clams that Mother Nature put there.
When you do what they do, it doesn't matter if there's a natural set, because they're putting the seeds down for their next crop. But all the baymen here, we rely on nature. So everything they do damages the natural revitalization of the harbor. So every time they clear cut their land's perfect for their next seed crop. But it kind of damages the rest of the harbor. And their silt and everything else goes on top of our next seed set. So when our seed are real small, microscopic, like swimming around larvae, and get covered up with this huge plume of silt, our next set is not there anymore. And that happens year after year, so only our strongest survive. Whereas if they weren't here and our natural set came in, this place would be the greatest harbor that it used to be.
For the past 18 to 20 years, the preparation that was done on the oyster beds for the oyster seed has been done by conventional methods with the older oyster boats and the conventional oyster dredges. That's been a pretty good system. It's worked out and we're making a profit. But we're only getting, of the hatchery seed that we put out on the bottom, we only get from 15 to 35% of that seed back to go to market. So there is room for improvement. And that room for improvement is the H. Butler flour. Now with this vessel, we'll be able to clean up the oyster drills, which are a small snail, the drill holes in the oysters. We'll be able to clean up crabs and starfish. Now those are the major predators that give us a problem, and we should be much better able to cope with those problems with the H. Butler flour.
It actually is a vacuum cleaner. It just touches the bottom, about 12 foot on the long, 12 inches long and 10 foot wide. And it just picks the very top of the bottom with all the oysters and drills and stars and what have you. They come up on the pipe that's going up onto the hopper up here, the conveyor screen, and they go up the screen, and then they go into a flat screen where we put lime into it to kill the stars and the algae and all those things. And then it goes down on the deck, and the oysters will be on the deck, and down in the hole will be the drills. We don't waste any of that material that goes in the bottom. It's taken onto another bed and planted there. We planted so thick that we could bury the drills and kill them, making new oyster beds. It's my expectation that with this new Pine Island, we will clean up the beds from the drills, the stars, and the crabs, and algae, and all the other things, and raise. I'm looking for 75 to 85% of the oyster we put in the bay to come back.
It's a fragile environment on the bottom. When you look at the stratification of sediment in the water, you also get levels of oxygen inside those sediments. In the coarser grain sediments at the surface, where water can get in between what we call the interstitial space between grains of sand and whatnot, or gravel or anything else, it's relatively highly oxygenated water. In finer sediments that are compacted, you get what's called a redox line. So you can go down a couple of inches, you've got oxygen in the upper layer of sediment, and as you go down below it, all of a sudden there's a black line. Below a certain depth, there's no more oxygen. And that sediment is loaded with nutrients. When you jet into that or disturb it and you blow it up, all those nutrients released, whatever oxygen you had in there also, and oxygen in the water column, has these nutrients and organics and stuff exposed to it. Those organics, whether you've got living organisms or whether it's just rotting material, essentially sucks what oxygen remains in the water column out. It's called dissolved oxygen demand. And it reduces the overall level of oxygen in the overlying water column and in that top layer of lighter sediments.
I built this dredge right here for a demonstration project to show what these hydraulic dredges do to the bay bottom. The object of the dredge is to peel the living layer off the seafloor and direct it into the basket with this cutting edge. But what happens to the rest of the bay bottom is the real story. When they cut away that living layer, this water is blowing underneath it, deep into the mud. And that mud is being resuspended as this dredge goes along. Now, when you carve this living layer off, beneath that living layer, all what the clams have excreted, what the invertebrates have excreted, and remember, these clams and oysters are filter feeders. They process from the water column all kinds of algae and detritus, the phytoplankton, the zooplankton, and when they digest it, they turn it into feces, and it goes into the bottom. When they don't digest it, they still process it. They process it into pseudo-feces, and it goes into the bottom as well. And they process a huge amount.
When you expose organics to the water column, you increase what they call oxygen demand, and as that oxygen is used by the organisms that are exposed or the organisms that are being destroyed or rot or whatever else in a short period of time, you're dropping the level of oxygen in the water column rapidly. So the overall effect is a lower level of oxygen in whatever water body that's taking place in. animals then that are pelagic or free swimming, that move about in the water column, suffocate. You're affecting every single organism that lives on the bottom and in the water column. Fish can get away from it. They can move away relatively rapidly, except for the smaller juveniles and eggs, which can't get away very fast. Crabs, whether they're spider crabs or horseshoe crabs or calico crabs or anything else, usually can't get away fast enough. I've taken photographs and done videography myself of areas that have been dredged. Even after the dredge leaves and the sediment starts moving across the bottom, it moves so fast with the current that even a crab can't get away fast enough. And as the crab starts to scuttle and move away from it, the sediment literally goes over the top of them and completely smothers them. And when you come back, or even if you stay there and observe it, as that sediment moves and layers out again and starts, instead of having a mound, it starts to drop out and settle to an even surface, the crab is upside down, fully exposed, with eggs on it and whatnot, and is dead. So you've got eggs and sperm mixing in the water column. Wherever they can get together and meet, you get an animal out of it that floats through the water column, eventually settles out somewhere where the currents aren't very strong and grows. That animal at that stage, all through those stages, is a soft tissued animal. So to relate this to, again, dredging or water jet in the sediment, those soft tissues are abraded by sediment in the water column. You have a photograph of one of the dredge boats operating with a plume behind it. The dredge boat's moving with this massive plume of sediment that's not just light stuff, it includes heavier grained sands included in it. That's now spreading out and dropping out behind it. As it drops through the water column, it's moving in many cases faster than those juvenile shellfish or fish or eggs and sperm. It's heavier than the eggs and sperm. As it drops through the water column, if this is an egg in the water column and this is a grain of coarse-grained sediment, as it drops, it's going to hit it. It's going to abrade it. It's going to open or rip or tear the outermost tissue of the animal, and it's going to die.
The bottom line is this is an incredible asset. And when you see pictures like that, you're like, what's going on here? Something doesn't seem right. And you know, we're all so busy with our lives, there's so much going on. The key to getting people to work together to figure out what really is going on here and bring it to the Army Corps of Engineers and to the Department of Environmental Conservation and to the federal EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and show them what's happening and try and educate them as to why we think this beautiful asset is being destroyed. Because I think that if it is being destroyed, then we've got to stop it. And we've got to figure out not a way to put somebody out of business, but a way to figure out a way to conduct that business in a way that's not harmful to this beautiful natural asset or harmful to the other people trying to make their livelihood here.
The problems in the environment are a function of evolution, and they've been getting worse incrementally. And we didn't do anything for a long time, we didn't pay attention, and now the bill is coming due. It's 50 years of bad habits. It's 50 years of not even understanding what we were doing. We never said to ourselves, what happens when you dump it on the ground? The thought was, it's gone, disappeared, never happened. That's not the case.
We've reached out to the DEC, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and to the federal government, the EPA, to ask them to take a closer look at what's going on. Perhaps consider a moratorium for a time period on the hydraulic dredging.
To my knowledge, it's the only body of water in the United States of America that allows hydraulic dredging of this sort to occur. To me, okay, it doesn't make sense. I was told that, you know, as close as Montauk, people who dredge responsibly took a look at what's happening here in our bay, in Oyster Bay, and said that they would be in handcuffs by noon if they were dredging the way that these guys are dredging here in Oyster Bay. Now, red flags, you know.
I'd like to go out into the harbor and take a look at the sediments where the dredges have operated in the areas adjacent to the leases where sediment has settled out, and an area outside of that, which is relatively undisturbed, and just do a comparison of both the sediment types and the organisms that are living in those different sediments. And that should give you a relatively accurate, a very accurate picture of what the effects of hydraulic dredging are.
He stopped. He's sitting.
Ready when you are.
I'm going to put an anchor out, Steve. Stassi's on his way, and he's coming out here to arrest the diver. For doing what? Really? Tell him, come on out. Well, Stassi's on his way, coming to the marina, and if we're in front of the boats or we're diving where they're working, we're on their grounds, they're gonna come and arrest the diver.
Fuck that.
It's unbelievable, I'm shocked that he's gonna circle us for a half hour. Send a boat out. If we're doing something wrong, come on out and tell us we're doing something wrong.
So what's the problem?
What's this whole deal going on right now?
Conducting an investigation. We received a 911 call and we're conducting an investigation. You received a 911 call?
Yes. An emergency call because...
Did anyone laugh when they received the call? Received the call. We're conducting an investigation. We're going to take the proper documentation.
Documentation for...
why I'm here and what I'm doing here.
So yesterday the helicopter flying over our head. Were you in the helicopter yesterday?
I'm a Marine Corps cop.
Well, were you in the helicopter yesterday?
I'm in a helicopter? It's not a helicopter.
No. Because they came out yesterday, they flew around top of us, and it was kind of like intimidating, like we're doing something wrong. You know, if we're doing something wrong, then come out here and tell us we're doing something wrong.
Can I see the avoidance that I request?
What'd you request?
Your identification, registration of the vessel. I need to see a fire extinguisher because your tank is mounted inside the hull. Is there any other information that you need, sir?
I just want to ask one thing.
Yes,
Your
sir.
911 call.
Yes.
Was it a 911?
What's that?
Were we doing anything wrong?
We are required.
I'm asking you. I'm only asking you, are we doing something wrong here, Joe?
I'm conducting an investigation.
So was it right that they called you for a 911? That's all I want to know. Your personal
Anybody
opinion,
can
is this an
contact-
emergency?
I don't give out personal opinions. When I get a 911 call, I respond, I conduct an investigation. I responded, I conduct an investigation. You were in compliance with the safety check upon, okay?
Right.
Is there any further question that you have?
Yeah, what was your determination? Was this an emergency?
Was this an emergency?
Yes.
Anytime someone calls 911, it's not always an emergency, Mr. Peters.
So this wasn't an emergency then?
This was not an emergency.
Thank you very much. That's all I want to know.
Oyster Bay has had its fair share of, more than its fair share of corruption over the last 2 years, okay? The political figures in the Oyster Bay area have, gone to jail basically, or have been arrested for corruption and, being on the take and all. And so when I saw this and heard that, it didn't take much for me to put two and two together in my mind, that there was something very wrong going on here, and it was being proverbially swept under the carpet.
You guys are the stewards of this place. If it's not healthy, it's going to die, and you guys are out of business. You're out of luck. You're out of a job. You can't feed your family. There's a lot of things that tie into this that are, very, very important for the community. Not just for you or for me, but for everybody who lives here. If this disappears, where are we? I mean, who are we?
We're going around looking at the bottom. The Baymen say silt from the power dredges drifts off the dredges, lands on the public land, smothering the marine life, making it inappropriate for clams to set up. And we just want to show what type of bottom is right next to their lease here. So I'm dropping this pole down, has markers. They're a little more than a foot apart. Drop it down to the bottom. I touch down on the bottom, I can feel it's soft mud. Now I'm just going to push the pole into the bottom, see how far down I can get. You see how it is? Pretty much just goes right in. I can take it. I could continue to push this down in this pudding mud. It's unbelievable the amount of siltation that's been caused by the continuous dredging in this bay. If we take a look at it, right at this clamp is where the mud stops. I'll stand it next to me for some kind of a reference, but that's 10 feet of pudding mud. Siltation from hydraulic dredging operations. It's unbelievable to me that the state, the town, to me, is to continue here.
What we're looking at is a sediment core sample taken from about 125 feet or so outside the leased area on public grounds, where a lot of the sediment from the dredging operation settles out. And we wanted to see if there's, not just if, but what would be living in the sediment besides just clams, which do live under the surface, and we have some photos of their siphons. But there isn't a single living organism of any kind, nothing, inside this core sample, either from the bottom of it all the way to the surface. And there's nothing. Absolutely nothing in it. No worms, no amphipods,
So what does that?
no tiny clams, nothing. It's absolutely sterile.
What does that say to you?
It's useless as a part of an ecosystem, devoid of any kind of biological life that would convert any form of energy into anything useful. It's an absolute waste.
So we're outside in Cold Spring Harbor right now. Not much dredging goes on out in this area at all compared to inside the Oyster Bay Harbor. And I just want to show you and compare the bottom here out in Cold Spring Harbor, which has been our most healthiest, productive area the Baymen had in the last 12 years, what the bottom's like compared to the soft bottom inside. So if I took 2 sections of clam pipe and dropped it into the bottom, where earlier the other guy, Weems, was showing how easy it is to push that pipe into the ground, you got a hard bottom. That's a bottom that likes clams.
When I look at the future, it's a scary feeling. I mean, I'm a young guy. I have a girlfriend. I mean, I would love to get married and have a family one day, but being out here, it just doesn't seem like anything's getting any better to be able to support a family.
It's not good. You know, some of the best guys out there, guys I looked up to who could really bring in a lot of clams, are bringing in, you know, what I used to bring in when I was first starting out.
They no longer catch flounder anymore, basically, because they've been wiped out. They have nowhere to grow and spawn anymore because of this.
All those big commercial boats, they destroy everything. They're no good for anybody.
We're all attached to everything, each other, rocks, clams, fish. We're all breathing human beings on this planet. Everything, in my opinion, is attached. So when somebody screws it up, yeah, I'm willing to fight, not for money, but because it's the right thing to do. And I feel good that I'm with guys here in the Bay that seem to feel similar.
So the fight goes on. It's a little bit like David versus Goliath, but it's a good fight. We're fighting for our livelihood, we're fighting for equal rights, and we're fighting for the Bay.